There is a country where people enter supermarkets barefoot, get their faces tattooed to show who they are and where they come from, and use their bodies as a code of power and desire. A place where widows had to marry relatives of the deceased. Chiefs could have several wives, and women could have several lovers, without guilt or shame. This is New Zealand, the last corner of the planet inhabited by humans, a country of surreal landscapes that served as the setting for the Lord of the Rings, and with active volcanoes under towns inhabited by thousands of people. Make yourself comfortable and open your eyes wide, because in this video from Uncensored World we are going to discover the strangest place in the world, how the government went so far as to hire a magician to improve the country, and why the arrival of Europeans changed everything. Let's begin. There are surely few places as remote, wild, and magically scenic as New Zealand, a country where nature does not seem like a backdrop, but rather the absolute protagonist. Sharp mountains emerging from low clouds, impossibly blue lakes, active volcanoes, and forests so dense that they seem to belong to another world. It is no coincidence that some of the most famous fantasy worlds in cinema have been filmed here. Because in this country, as you will discover on this trip, reality easily surpasses fiction. New Zealand is an island country located in the southwestern corner of the Pacific Ocean, thousands of miles from any other large inhabited territory. It consists of 2 main islands and dozens of smaller islands, separated from the rest of the world by such an enormous distance that for centuries it remained completely isolated. This isolation explains something key. When the rest of the world had already been organized into empires and religions for centuries, these islands had not yet been inhabited by anyone. A key detail in understanding why New Zealand could be considered the strangest country on the planet. The Maori are the indigenous people of New Zealand, descendants of Polynesian navigators who crossed thousands of miles of open ocean long before maps, compasses, or modern instruments existed. They arrived from remote Pacific islands to this region now known as New Zealand, guided only by the stars, ocean currents, the flight of birds, and the color of the water. They sailed in huge hand-carved canoes, some capable of carrying dozens of people along with seeds, animals, and tools, aware that there were no maps, no signs, and no certainty of finding land. To understand the magnitude of that journey, just imagine climbing aboard a wooden boat, venturing out into the open ocean for weeks on end, knowing that there was no idea of returning. For them, the sea did not end on a map, but at the end of the world, a real belief that coexisted with the constant possibility of death. Either they would find a new land where they could start from scratch, or the ocean would swallow them up forever. When they finally spotted these green and mountainous islands emerging from the fog, they made a definitive decision: to settle. They called this territory Aotearoa, the land of the Great White Cloud, a name that accurately describes the way the island reveals itself from the ocean, shrouded in mist and changing skies. The name New Zealand would come centuries later, when European sailors, inspired by the Dutch province of Zeeland, renamed these lands from a perspective that had nothing to do with them. As you can see, long before it was known as New Zealand, the identity of the place was already marked by those who had reached it without maps or certainties, guided only by the sky, the sea, and instinct. Isolated from the rest of the world for centuries, the Maori developed their own society here, adapted to an extreme environment, where survival depended on the body, the group, and social codes very different from those of Europeans. For them, the body was not something to be hidden or ashamed of. It was a visible language, a map on which identity, status, power, and also desire could be read. In this society, clothing was minimal and functional, designed to protect against the weather, and living with little or no clothing did not carry the moral burden that it would acquire centuries later with the arrival of Europeans. From very early on, the Maori began to mark the body as a form of social communication. Through their tattoos, ritual scars, and adornments, one could tell where a person came from, what lineage they belonged to, what position they held within the group, and even what kind of respect or attraction they inspired. In men, tattoos on the face and body spoke of bravery, rank, and experience in war. For women, tattoos on the lips and chin indicated maturity, authority, and attractiveness, functioning as visible codes of status within the community. For them, each line engraved on the skin told a specific story: where you came from, what you had experienced, what battles you had fought, and what place you occupied within society. It was not a light or reversible choice, but a permanent mark of identity. Interestingly, although the context is very different, it is not so far removed from what happens today. Many people get tattoos to remember something important, honor a loss, mark a stage in their lives, or not forget who they are and what they want in life. With that in mind, answer with just a yes or no. Do you have any tattoos? And if you feel like it, tell us if any of them have a special meaning. For all these reasons, the body of the Indigenous people of New Zealand not only represented strength or hierarchy, but also intention. Who you were, what role you played, and how you related to others could be read directly on your skin. And from this very direct and physical way of understanding life, social norms and relationships emerged that today, seen from the outside, may seem shocking, provocative, or difficult to understand. In many tribes, chiefs could have several wives. They did not do so as a symbol of excess or personal pleasure, as each union served to strengthen the clan, expand protection, and increase the chances of survival in this brutal environment. In a land where nature not only imposes rules, but can destroy everything in a matter of hours. As we will see later, there are even those who have tried to challenge it alone, crossing impossible seas in a simple kayak, ultimately paying a price that reflects the extent to which this region can be extreme and ruthless. Returning to the more controversial realities of Maori society, female sexuality was not subject to the rigid control that Christian morality would later impose. In the past, a woman could choose her intimate partners without bearing the burden of stigma or social condemnation. Here we see a paradox that is difficult to ignore, a society considered primitive from a European perspective, but one that allowed personal freedoms unthinkable on the European continent in the 19th century. If what you're hearing is breaking your preconceptions, support us with a like so we can continue to bring you fascinating stories like this one. And when several seemingly contradictory norms coexist without conflict, the question is inevitable. How could such a different way of life develop without falling apart from within? Part of the answer lies in how they understood community life. For the Maori, belonging to a clan meant depending on each other to hunt, defend themselves, and survive. Therefore, many norms did not arise from moral ideas, but from the practical need to maintain a strong and united group in the face of an unpredictable environment. That is also why practices such as levirate marriage existed, a tradition that is surprising today and that very few cultures have maintained throughout history. In Maori society, when a man died, his brother or a close relative could join the widow as a form of protection, family continuity, and social stability. This was not a cruel imposition or punishment, but a practical solution accepted within a community where being alone, or widowed in this case, could mean not surviving. There were also forms of extreme hospitality that were incomprehensible to Europeans. In certain contexts, visitors could be invited to participate in ritual dances with women wearing little or no clothing, and even in specific cases to share intimacy as a gesture of trust, respect, and alliance between clans. This was not some kind of vulgar exchange, but rather practices accepted within their culture, which clashed with the Christian morality of the colonizers, becoming one of the greatest cultural scandals of the time. And could you live in a society where these norms were the norm? Leave us a 9 if you would love it, or a 1 if you wouldn't want to live it even remotely. This clash of realities soon had consequences, because when Europe arrived in New Zealand, it didn't just bring trade and conflict, it brought a morality that was not willing to coexist with what it found. And from that moment on, the country's history would change forever. a reality that we will later explore in detail. But there is something else that explains why this society was organized in this way, and it has nothing to do with culture or the arrival of Europeans. It has to do with the place where all this happened, because New Zealand is not only one of the most beautiful countries on the planet, it is also one of the wildest and most unforgiving. Beneath its green landscapes and picture postcard mountains lies an unstable, living land that never stops moving. Active volcanoes breathe beneath inhabited villages. Seismic faults cause frequent earthquakes, and entire cities are built on land that is never still. In places like Rotorua, a city known throughout the country for its intense geothermal activity, the ground literally boils beneath your feet. Steam rises from the sidewalks. The smell of sulfur is part of the everyday landscape, and the hot earth sets the pace of daily life. Here, the natural heat of the subsoil has been used for generations, even for cooking, giving rise to the hangi, a traditional technique developed by the Maori that uses volcanic rocks and steam from the earth to prepare food by burying it underground for hours. Living here is literally like living on a permanent natural grill, where the island itself cooks the food, and the boundary between home and geological force disappears completely. Living in such a place has shaped not only the way of cooking, but also the mentality of its inhabitants, who are accustomed to living with a nature that is as generous as it is unpredictable. In addition, New Zealand is surrounded by one of the harshest oceans on the planet. Between Australia and its shores lies the Tasman Sea, a stretch of water famous for its wild winds, giant waves, and currents capable of destroying boats designed to withstand the most extreme conditions. For decades, this sea has been the scene of shipwrecks, disappearances, and impossible rescues. To understand the extent to which this environment does not forgive mistakes, one need only know the story of Andrew Macaulay, an Australian adventurer, experienced mountaineer, and kayaker, awarded for his exploits. He decided to do something that many considered crazy: to cross the Tasman Sea alone by kayak, from Australia to New Zealand. For him, this adventure was not something improvised. Andrew Macaulay prepared for years. He trained, studied the behavior of the sea, and adjusted his equipment, aware that he would not only be facing physical resistance, but also an ocean capable of changing completely in a matter of minutes. His goal was no ordinary feat. He intended to cross the Tasman Sea, one of the most dangerous sea passages on the planet, alone, covering more than 1,600 kilometers of open ocean, with giant waves and unpredictable currents, using only a kayak, 2 paddles, and his own hands. For weeks he advanced completely alone, without air or sea support, in a small boat, exposed to constant cold, sudden storms, and a sea that gives no second chances. Every day was a struggle against fatigue, constant humidity, and the uncertainty of not knowing what awaited him at dawn. Until one day in February 2007, when he was just 120 kilometers off the coast of New Zealand, everything went wrong. Andrew Macaulay sent out an emergency signal. His message was brief and desperate. His kayak was sinking and he had fallen into the sea. After that, silence. Rescue teams sprang into action immediately, but the Tasman Sea gave no answers. Days later, his kayak was found near Milford Sound. His body was never found. The ocean had decided the outcome. This story is no exception. It is a modern reminder of what this region has always been, a place where courage, preparation, and experience do not guarantee survival. In New Zealand, nature does not distinguish between heroes and mistakes. For centuries, living in New Zealand meant adapting, resisting, and accepting that nature does not negotiate. And the most surprising thing is that this way of life did not disappear. It is still present today, in the mentality, in the customs, and in situations so strange that, in almost any other country, they would seem impossible. In this country, the relationship with the environment continues to shape people's daily lives, even in cities. It is not uncommon to see houses built near active seismic faults, towns settled on volcanic terrain such as Rotorua, or communities that have learned to read the land as if it were a living organism. This normalization of risk has created a very particular mindset. New Zealanders call themselves Kiwis, and this is neither a coincidence nor a simple, friendly nickname. The name does not come from the fruit, as many outsiders believe, but from a bird endemic to the country, the kiwi, a small, nocturnal, solitary, and self-sufficient animal that cannot fly, lives apart, and survives in silence in one of the most hostile environments on the planet. For many, this animal sums up the character of the country better than anything else. Being a Kiwi means precisely that, being independent, not needing outside attention, and being able to fend for oneself. If something breaks, you fix it. If the environment is harsh, you learn to live with it. And if there is no help, you improvise. Do you consider yourself more of a Kiwi or more sociable? Yes or no? And if you feel like it, tell us why. This philosophy has given rise to a much-repeated idea in New Zealand known as the number 8 wire mentality. A mentality that refers to a simple wire that was formerly used on farms to fix just about anything. The concept sums up a very clear way of thinking. With ingenuity, patience, and whatever you have at hand, almost anything can be solved. A kind of real-life MacGyver, but applied to everyday life. This same philosophy explains one of the images that most surprises those arriving in the country for the first time. People walking barefoot in supermarkets, gas stations, or downtown streets without anyone batting an eye. It is not a provocation or an alternative fashion statement. For many, it is simply comfortable, practical, and consistent with a life in constant contact with the environment. In a country where nature is present in everything, wild beaches, forests, volcanoes, and trails, growing up barefoot has been common for generations, especially in childhood. It is a simple way to feel the ground, move freely, and not put unnecessary barriers between the body and the earth. Today, some relate it to modern ideas such as grounding or energetic connection to the soil. But for most New Zealanders, there is no philosophy behind it. It is custom, climate, education, and cultural heritage. A normality inherited from a country where the land has always carried more weight than rigid social norms. Here, going barefoot is not synonymous with poverty or rebellion. It is normality. It is a silent way of saying that the environment is not feared, it is respected, and inhabited without too many layers between the body and the ground. In many areas of New Zealand, the climate changes abruptly, the winds can be extreme, and the feeling of isolation remains real, even in the 21st century. All this is because this country is far from everything. Very far. And that shows in the way people organize themselves, help each other, and interact. This constant coexistence with unpredictable forces has created a culture where the strange is not perceived as something negative. And perhaps that is why one of the most surreal cases in the modern history of a developed country occurred. For more than 2 decades, the city of Christchurch had an official wizard hired by the government. His name was Ian Brackenbury Channel, known simply as the Wizard of New Zealand. It was not a joke, nor a one-off advertising campaign. Brackenbury Channel received an annual public salary, funded by the city council, to officially serve as a wizard. His role, according to municipal documents, was to promote the city, entertain the public, and provide alternative thinking. In practice, he performed rituals, gave eccentric speeches, performed rain dances during times of drought, and made public appearances wearing a robe and carrying a staff in the city center. And for years, no one seriously questioned it. In a place where daily life coexists with volcanoes, earthquakes, and extreme isolation, the figure of an official wizard did not seem so absurd. It was, in a way, consistent with its environment. That constant feeling of being in a fantasy setting is one of the reasons why many describe New Zealand as a magical country, even without believing in magic. It is no coincidence that some of the most famous landscapes in modern cinema were filmed here. Sharp mountains, endless grasslands, impossible rivers, active volcanoes, and forests that seem to come from somewhere other than Earth. But everything really exists here. There are no sets, There are no special effects to create the environment. Films such as The Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit, and Avatar found in New Zealand the perfect setting to represent worlds that seemed unreal. Because here the unreal already exists. Middle-earth did not have to be invented. It just had to be discovered in this remote country. In New Zealand, there is a place that sums up this fusion of fantasy and reality better than any other. Hobbiton, which was once the film set for the Shire, still exists today as it appeared in the films. Hobbiton is located on New Zealand's North Island and is a collection of green hills, winding paths, and houses dug directly into the earth. It is not a temporary recreation or a set built for the occasion. It is a permanent setting, integrated into the real landscape as if it had always been there. The history of this place begins when Peter Jackson, director of The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, noticed a real farm known as Alexander Farm. That land, with its rolling hills and untouched meadows, seemed to him the perfect setting to bring the village of the hobbits to life. After filming the first trilogy, the sets were dismantled. However, years later, with the arrival of The Hobbit, a different decision was made to rebuild the set and leave it intact permanently. Since then, Hobbiton has become one of the most visited and symbolic places in the country. Walking through Hobbiton is not just a tribute to cinema. It is the unsettling feeling of being inside a fictional world that is still there, intact, integrated into the landscape as if it had always been part of it. A perfect example of how, in New Zealand, the boundary between the real and the fantastic is almost never entirely clear. And seeing that combination of epic landscapes, extreme isolation, and eccentric characters like that government-paid wizard, it's hard not to wonder if reality inspired fiction. If you're enjoying this trip, support us with a like and subscribe to Uncensored World, because here you'll discover the world like no other channel. New Zealand has that ability to make the improbable seem logical, to make the strange fit together. It's a place where you can go from a wild beach to a snow-capped mountain range, from a crystal-clear lake to a volcanic area where the ground boils beneath your feet, all in a matter of hours. This extreme diversity concentrated in a relatively small space is one of the country's great paradoxes. In a matter of hours, you can go from active volcanoes to glacial fjords, from endless grasslands to rainforests. Places like Milford Sound, where huge rock walls plunge into a dark and silent sea, create the feeling of being in a primitive, almost untouched world. Just a few hundred kilometers away, the landscape changes completely. In Tongariro National Park, active volcanoes, impossibly colored lakes, and reddish terrain form a scene that seems like another planet. The ground smokes, the wind cuts through your skin, and the earth constantly reminds you that it is still alive beneath your feet. But this beauty is not just for the postcards. Living here has never been easy, and that reality has deeply marked the way of thinking of those who have inhabited these islands for centuries. The Maori heritage is still present not only in rituals, but also in a very concrete way of understanding the territory as something alive, unpredictable, and worthy of respect. This connection explains why New Zealand tolerates what would be ridiculed or eliminated elsewhere. Trying to impose normality in such a changing environment usually ends badly. Here, adaptation has always been the best strategy. And perhaps that is why, when one observes the daily life of the country, its customs, its silences, and its oddities, one begins to understand that New Zealand is not strange by chance. It is the logical result of centuries of isolation, extreme nature, and cultures forced to constantly reinvent themselves. But this balance only worked as long as the outside world remained far away. Because when Europeans arrived on these islands, they brought not only trade, weapons, and religion. They brought a very specific idea of what was moral, and anything that did not fit into that idea was destined to disappear. For the first explorers and missionaries, Maori society was disconcerting from the moment of first contact, not only because of their relationship with the body or some of the rituals and traditions you have learned about, but because of a form of hospitality that had no equivalent in Europe. a hospitality that was not limited to offering food or shelter, but involved integrating the visitor into the life of the group. In ancient anthropological accounts and travel diaries, many written with amazement, others with horror, the same idea is repeated. The visitor was not treated as a stranger, but as someone who should be fully welcomed. Eating together, sharing space, participating in ritual dances, and, in very specific contexts, being invited into a closeness that was incomprehensible to Europeans. Within Maori culture, there was a fundamental principle known as manaakitanga. It was not just hospitality, it was respect, care, and a moral obligation to honor the visitor. Rejecting this welcome could be interpreted as a serious offense, a breach of trust between clans. For them, opening up to others strengthened alliances and ensured stability in an unpredictable world. Some accounts describe how travelers were invited to participate in ceremonies where the body, dance, and physical closeness reached extremes they were unfamiliar with. It was not provocation or spectacle, but ritual. It was about belonging. It was about showing that the visitor was accepted under the protection of the group. Within Maori culture, this principle was linked to manaakitanga, the moral obligation to care for, respect, and integrate the visitor. Some elders symbolically referred to this welcome as te here o te manuhiri, the bond with the visitor, a way of expressing that the newcomer was no longer a stranger. There are historical accounts collected in the diaries of explorers and missionaries from the 18th and 19th centuries, such as those of James Cook and Joseph Banks, that describe offers of companionship, gestures of ritual closeness, and situations that they interpreted as extreme hospitality, often without understanding the cultural context in which they occurred. For the European mindset of the 18th and 19th centuries, this was scandalous. Missionaries and chroniclers began to reinterpret these practices according to their own moral codes, exaggerating them, simplifying them, and in many cases deliberately distorting them. What was ritual became excess. What was consensus became disorder. The cultural distance was so great that any attempt at understanding was replaced by judgment. In personal diaries and letters sent to Europe, these customs were described as evidence of a society that, according to them, needed to be corrected. Extreme hospitality went from being a value to becoming a moral threat. Here the brutal contrast appears. For the Maori, the body was language, identity, and connection. For Europeans, it was something to be regulated, covered, and controlled. Two opposing ways of understanding life colliding head-on. That clash did not remain in words. Very soon, imported morals began to impose themselves on local traditions. What had been normal for centuries came to be considered unacceptable, and what had functioned as a social foundation was pushed into silence. Do you think the Europeans did the right thing, or had the right to ban these practices? Yes or no? From that moment on, many of these customs did not disappear overnight, but they could no longer be practiced openly, and what happened next would forever mark the country's identity. With the arrival of European rule, the prohibitions began. Ritual after ritual was labeled immoral, inappropriate, or dangerous. The possibility of maintaining multiple unions, bodily freedom, certain forms of extreme hospitality, and many cultural expressions came to be considered practices that had to be eradicated. Not always through direct violence, but through shame, social pressure, and symbolic punishment. For decades, much of Maori culture was silenced. What had previously been passed down from generation to generation began to be hidden in the private sphere. Talking about certain traditions was no longer safe. Practicing them was impossible. The body, which had been a form of language, became a means of control. But not everything disappeared. Some customs survived by adapting to new forms. Others remained protected in memory, and many remained dormant, waiting for the right moment to re-emerge. Because a culture cannot be erased when it is born of isolation, of the land, and of the constant need to survive. In recent decades, New Zealand has experienced a profound Maori renaissance. Language, traditional tattoos, rituals, and cultural identity have regained space and respect. One of the most visible examples of this recovery is the haka. Long before it became a sporting symbol, the haka was a war cry, a challenge, a way to intimidate the enemy and reinforce group unity. Today, that same haka is known around the world thanks to New Zealand's national rugby team, the All Blacks. What many see as a simple pre-game spectacle is, in fact, a living cultural heritage, a demonstration of identity, collective strength, and connection to ancestors. And therein lies the ultimate paradox. New Zealand is now one of the most modern, stable, and developed countries on the planet. But beneath that orderly surface coexist traditions, mentalities, and contradictions that do not fit any global norm. Because this is a country where people walk barefoot in the supermarket, where for years the government paid the salary of a magician, and where nature decides when you can move forward and when you cannot. New Zealand is not the strangest country in the world by chance. It is because freedom and control, beauty and danger, modernity and traditions that never quite fit into the European view have coexisted here, and still do. Perhaps that is why it continues to fascinate so much. Because it does not try to be like anyone else. Because it does not allow itself to be understood quickly. Now, let's get down to practical reality. New Zealand is not a cheap country. The cost of living is high, especially for accommodation, food, and transportation. Eating out, renting a car, or simply filling your shopping cart at the supermarket costs considerably more than in most European or Latin American countries. As for entering the country, most travelers from Europe and America do not need a visa for short tourist stays. All you need to do is apply for an electronic authorization before your trip, a simple online process that allows you to stay in the country for several weeks without any complications. Getting there is not difficult, but it is long. It is on the other side of the world from almost everywhere. Flights usually involve many hours and stopovers, but once you are there, getting around is quite easy. The roads are in good condition, transportation works well, and renting a car or van is one of the most common ways to travel around the country. And one last curiosity to close the trip. Here, nature is not only protected, it is controlled down to the last detail. It is forbidden to enter with undeclared food, seeds, or organic products. This is no exaggeration. The country takes its ecosystem so seriously that it prefers to inconvenience visitors rather than jeopardize its natural balance. That's New Zealand, a remote, expensive, demanding place, but also a unique one. And perhaps that's why those who come here rarely forget it. At Uncensored World, we hope this video has helped you discover New Zealand, as you've seen, one of the most fascinating gems on the planet. If so, don't hesitate to leave us a like and a comment. It's the best way to help us continue working every week to bring you interesting content like this. Or like this video you can now watch to discover another of the most mysterious and beautiful places on the planet. Click on it. You're going to enjoy it.